should taxi drivers also sign up to be Uber drivers? Now, I want to say right in the beginning of this video, there is some construction going on outside my house. You might or might not be able to hear it given the microphone, but jumping right into the video, short answer, because I hate YouTubers that ramble on, I'm actually going to say yes. Now, this may be an unpopular opinion. I'd be very curious to see what people think in the comments, whether you are an Uber driver, a taxi driver, or both. The main reason why I want to bring this up and do a video about this is because I've done a couple videos about Uber taxis. The Uber app now has a feature that basically what you can do is order an Uber normally for passengers. Not necessarily for drivers, at least I'll talk about that in a second, but for passengers, I can order an Uber. And let's say there's no Ubers available. It's a very busy time. Let's just say it's the opposite, it's quiet. Basically, there's no Ubers available, but there are taxis available. And I've done a video about this and talked about it, how basically when you order an Uber, but it happens to be a taxi, everything's the exact same as if you're ordering an Uber when it comes to a passenger or a rider, except the fact that it's a taxi. It's kind of weird because it looks like a taxi, it feels like a taxi, and it seems like a taxi, but the logistics of ordering it, getting in the car, ending the ride, the payment happens just as if it's an Uber ride. So obviously, I've done a couple of videos, like I said, about the passenger experience. And I think, being honest, I think it's a great feature. Because if I need to get an Uber and there's not that many cars available, or like say Uber says, hey, you know what? All the cars are kind of far away, but we have a taxi close. If a taxi pulls up, it's just like you're taking an Uber. So I've talked about that on the passenger side or the rider side. The big thing though now, flip-flopping it, is talking about drivers. Now, obviously, for my Uber drivers out there, you probably don't have to worry about this or even think about it because you're like, hey, I'm driving for Uber, I'm not a taxi driver, etc. But for my taxi drivers out there, and I know it's the definition of irony when it comes to Uber, where you're like, oh man, I hate Uber, it's like a horrible company, I don't want to work for them, they're taking over a lot of taxi drivers' jobs. I mean, I know this has been a big battle for years when it comes to ride sharing versus taxi drivers. And I hate to say it, and again, I might get some hate for this, so again, feel free to be honest in the comments, and I know everyone always is. I feel like this is one of those situations it's one of those situations where it's if you can't beat them, join them. And the reason why I say this is because you can still do both. I got to give Uber credit where I think credit's due, where they're saying, look, you know, if let's say you're a taxi driver, and of course, it's a lot harder now, of course, as we all know, to be a taxi driver and to make ends meet, especially when compared to Uber drivers. And I know Uber driving versus taxi driving is a bit of a debate. I've talked about that in other videos, especially like, you know, more so last year, where I know some people, some drivers are saying, hey, I actually make more money now driving for a taxi than driving for Uber. I know some people, some passengers are saying, I'd actually rather order a taxi now with no surge pricing and all this kind of stuff than get into an Uber, right? So obviously this, I know it's a big debate. But the big reason why I say yes, right at the beginning of this video, is the fact that, like say if you are a taxi driver and you're driving around, you're not getting that many rides, you can still have it signed up on the Uber app. That way, let's say you're driving and you're like, man, it's a slow day, I'm not getting anything, and a ride pops up on the Uber app, you can choose to accept it, or you can choose to deny it. But at the end of the day, it allows you to do more rides. And yes, I know some taxi drivers right now watching this video might say, hey, Mark, I'm not gonna lie, I think that the Uber app is horrible. It doesn't pay that much. I get paid way more being a taxi driver than being an Uber driver. And that can be true, but here's the thing. If it's like say 1 p.m. on a Tuesday and you're not getting any rides, it's dead. You're not getting any rides, and you have the Uber app right there, and it says, hey, you can do a ride. Yeah, it might not pay that much. Yeah, maybe you can make more money doing a different ride. But if you're going to be working anyway, and you're not getting any rides, and you're literally just sitting there idling, not moving, not doing anything, you might as well do that Uber ride. And like I said, I know I might not pay that much, but as a classic saying goes, like I said a couple times already, if you can't beat them, join them. I do think it's beneficial. Obviously, I do suggest for all my taxi drivers out there looking to the fine print, the terms, double check this because it could be different situation to situation. It could also be different area to area, like I've done in so many videos on this channel when it comes to Uber requirements and Lyft requirements and ride sharing requirements. Every area is a little bit different, right? So it could be that in some areas, this whole taxi Uber integration is very seamless. In other ones, maybe it's a bit more technical where there's other things you do have to worry about. So I do suggest doing research. Of course, like anything in life, given the fact that there's so many differences from city to city and state to state when it comes to ride sharing. But at the end of the day, and I know, again, I know a lot of taxi drivers might not want to hear this, might disagree with me, might not like the perspective on this video. And again, feel free to post comments about it. I do think it's worth it, mainly because if you're going to be on the road and you're not getting that many rides, at least you can still do something, and something is better than nothing. And I know some drivers might say, hey, you know what? I'd rather wait an hour and not get a ride than drive for Uber. And I understand that. Like, I know a lot of taxi drivers don't want to work for Uber to support them or to help them out, et cetera, right? But I got to say, if you have an hour and then you're not getting any rides driving for the taxi and driving a taxi, you're not getting any taxi rides, you might as well sign up with Uber. That way, if one does pop up and you have a slow moment, you have a slow hour, or let's say there's not a lot of traffic going on, you can accept the ride, do an Uber ride, get done with it, then maybe go back to doing your normal taxi rides and go back and forth.